After I woke up, first it was minutes that passed, then hours. I didn't feel right. Nothing felt right. All I could do was sit on the captain's bed, stare at the door, and wait. I knew some pony was coming to take me out of Captain Tempest's room. Every fiber of my being told me that I wasn't supposed to be here. That it wasn't right for me to be here. "You're gonna be fine, Backlash." I heard the gruff voice of a stallion speak up from across the room, the sudden words perking my ears up as I looked towards the door. "Yeah, you'll be fine." The soft voice of a young mare called out jubilantly from near the toilet. "Hello?" I asked, slowly getting to my hooves and sliding off the bed. "Who's there?" "I say, how does he not recognize us?" A very proper-sounding stallion spoke from behind the coat rack. I swung my hoof out, yanking the captain's raincoat off the rack as I looked behind it. Nothing. Just the wall. "Cool ya jets there." The young stallion's voice came again from the desk. "We're your friends, you know? No need to panic or nothing." "My friends?" I asked, spinning around as the voices all seemed to clatter amongst themselves. "But where are you?" "Why, right in front of you, of course." The gentle stallion spoke up enthusiastically. I looked up at the coat rack, looking at the hat hanging on it. "I must say, you flatter me with that look of yours, Sir Backlash." "Ah, but I want him to look at me that way," the mare from the toilet spoke up. I smiled and waved a hoof in front of me. "Oh, I see what's going on. Very funny, Everpony, trying to cheer me up like this." I wasn't quite sure why I said that as I walked over and hoofed open the tank on the toilet, looking for a speaker hidden inside. It must be Skyline's idea. She's always wanted to prank me like this, didn't she? Why did everything feel so wrong? "Oh my!" The voice came from what seemed like in front of my face, startling me. "You could at least buy me dinner first." I dropped the lid back on and scrambled backwards, pressing into the desk. No, this isn't possible. It can't be. "Watch it, bub. I thought we told you to calm down." The desk yelped. I collapsed onto the floor and panted hard. "It's okay, Backlash. You're just having a psychotic break. It'll pass if you just don't let any of the voices in. Won't it? Oh, Celestia, why can't I just be with my friends?" "I say, what are you doing lying on the floor? It can't be very comfortable, now can it?" The hat spoke up. "Oi, give him some quiet. I think he's trying to rationalize us." The desk responded. "You'd have thought he'd have figured it out by now," the toilet whispered. I pressed my hooves into my ears, whining as they continued to talk amongst each other. I can't stand it anymore. I rolled and got to my hooves, clenching my eyes shut as I yelled, "None of you are real! Get out of my head!" The creak of the cabin doors swung open, breaking my concentration. Only the sound of the breeze could be heard, the voices having fallen silent. "Backlash?" Longbow's voice asked slowly. My eyes shot open as I turned around. Longbow stood in the doorway, the blazing orange sky behind her making her seem otherworldly as I stumbled forward, throwing my hooves around her. She did the same, squeezing tightly as I cried into her wet neck, the warmth of it fading the longer I held her. Why was she growing so cold? "Longbow, you're freezing," I said with a chuckle, pulling back and opening my eyes. "You..." Her neck was covered in blood, streaming from a single hole in the side of it that she stared at me blankly. I couldn't do anything as she slumped out of my hooves and down to the deck of the ship, landing with a thud. She just laid there, unmoving, dead. "She died for you, Backlash." "They all will." The familiar voice of Pinkie Pie called from behind me. I spun around instinctively. My mind was torn with grief. How could she have died? How could I have let this happen? "They'll all die, and it's all your fault." I looked up as the pink pony started to cackle madly, parts of her muzzle and chest smoking and melting off of her. 42, I whispered without even thinking, my mind now feeling like it weighed 1,000,000 pounds. I dropped to the floor as my eyelids sank slowly. 42 striding up to me and putting her muzzle to my ear. I could feel her warm breath through my mane. "See you soon." I tried to scream, but my muzzle wouldn't open for some reason. My mouth instead tasted of wet leather and musty, burning wood, both of which mixed with the blood from my lip and filled my nose with a pungent smell. I was lying on my back. The pain from my rear legs was non-existent as I opened my eyes. "Ah, you're awake. You may have noticed that I put a bit in your mouth. You screamed for a while before you passed out. I took the liberty to make sure you didn't annoy me again. Oh, and I also take it you don't feel anything." The doctor called down from above me. Droplets of what I could only assume was my blood were running down his plastic poncho. I nodded as I noticed his horn was glowing, holding a fuzzy red tube in his magic. I couldn't focus my eyes as he lowered it down out of my sight. "That will pass. I wouldn't want you to miss the fun part of the Hydra." "The fun part?" Having regrown one hoof already, I know there was no fun part of Hydra. There was a small prick in the side of me. My pre-war medicine working quickly. "Oh, Celestia, it hurts." I screamed out as loud as I could through the bit, feeling as each muscle and nerve grew back at what seemed like an inch an hour, thrashing about as I was left for my legs to repair themselves. There was a loud creaking that filled my ears, and I could feel running through my legs, making me feel like I was being stretched out far enough that I should have been ripped in half. I tensed up all at once, attempting to use SATs as my sanctuary again, delighted to see it time come to a stop. The pain in me ebbed away, and I could finally think once more. The pip-bug transferred me to the medical screen, like it had last time. I looked over the generic pony shape. The rear legs were replaced with dotted outlines, I guess to signify that I had none to speak of. Well, yet. Anyway. I flipped the screen over to the audio logs section, wanting any excuse to keep away from the pain. The audio log list popped open, and automatically dropped down to the next file, allowing me to read the title off in my head. Ministry of Arcane Sciences Chief Twilight, Sparkle, Project Log 01, Project Golem Startup and Preliminary Data Collection Report. I played the log, and once again hoping that it contained something useful, finding the mirror pond. Ministry of Arcane Sciences Chief Twilight Sparkle, Project Log 01, Project Golem Startup and Preliminary Data Collection Report. In 3 minutes' time, Project Co-Lead Copper Rivet is scheduled to give me the word that the Arcano reactor systems are fully operational, and we can finally start transferring the flux reserve tanks into the main reactor assembly. It's been 3 months of hard work, and both Pinky and I are anxious to test the new system. Although she appears normal around others, I'm concerned for her state of mind. All the running around she does with her ministry keeps her busier than I am, and even I have to excessively rely on my teleportation to get between. I have to remember this isn't a personal log, and that those details need to wait until 9 p.m. to be recorded. Now, where was I? Knocking from the door. Huh? They finished already? That's never a good sign. The door was opening. Oh, Engineer Cole Brugette. I wasn't expecting a report from you. The log clicked and ended, leaving only silence in my mind. Wait, that was it? Celestia, these logs didn't have anything useful on them. If I wasn't hiding from the excruciating pain in my legs, I could just scream in frustration. Why do I have to be an idiot and get into situations like this? Calm yourself, Backlash. There has to be something useful on at least one of these. Even if there turns out not to be, the notes must have something useful in them. Somewhere, in all 1,000 pages of them. At least the autolog seemed short. Let's see. The next one's title is Ministry of Arcane Sciences Chief. You know. She's just going to repeat the title again anyway. Just play it. The file swapped down to the next one and popped open the little box. 3 hours ago, the reactor team managed to save Phase 1 from total loss when one of the turbine couplings cracked and jammed the induction filter. If copper rivet hadn't reached into the system to clear it, I might have had to scrap the whole reactor and start again from scratch. In doing so, she had to endure flux contamination along her entire right side. Let my report state that co-lead Copper Rivet showed exceptional resolve in the face of immediate danger, and personally saved the lives of 2 of her fellow employees at great risk of her own well-being. There was a long pause and the shuffling of papers. Dr. Slipcast told me that the flux poisoning wasn't giving her too much pain, but that she only had hours left at most. I used the time I had reserved for my lunch to take her to her parents' house in Manhattan, so she could be with them until she passed. I will save the remaining details of the ordeal for what is sure to be an extra long personal log tonight. I was informed earlier that the faulty coupling was replaced, and we are ready to attempt Phase 1 startup again. As of now, the project is still on schedule, and co-lead duties now fall to Engineer Cole. And a report. As the log ended and closed, I looked over the name of the file again. Ministry of Arcane Sciences Chief, Twilight Sparkle, Project Log 02, Project Golem Casualty Report. I didn't really know what to think. Once again, I took something for granted. I've been so focused on finding the answers I needed, I've completely looked past the fact that ponies died for this information. They died not knowing whether or not the world was going to end tomorrow, whether or not their families were going to be safe. Copper Rivet gave her life, not just to save the project, but to try and keep Equestria safe from its fate. I know that all these events played out over a century ago, and that there are a countless number of stories like these that were never told, but this one hits me differently. The way Twilight went about talking about her was so casual, like she was just a name in a report, nothing more. I could hear that she was saddened, deep down inside, but it made me angry that she wasn't more audibly upset. Copper Rivet was a pony. She had a life and responsibilities. Maybe she even had a special sun pony. The audio log list dropped down one more time, without me thinking about it. The entry playing on its own, as the log pulled me away from my other thoughts. Ministry of Arcane Sciences Chief Twilight Sparkle, Project Log 03, Project Golem Phase 1, Day 2 Status Report. With yesterday's successful testing of the sequential flux reactor, I have approved the work to install the mirror pond. The containment vessels I designed are performing above baseline expectations, with no recorded innate magical loss. I was correct, but the decahedron that was perfect geometrical shape to resonate the innate magical of the pools. It has made it somewhat difficult to transport, but one of Pinky's griffin chasers managed to lift the pair here only a few hours, knocking at the door before it opens. Oh, hello, Pinky. I didn't expect you yet. That seems to be happening a lot recently, actually. Please, sit down. Creaking of a chair. Twilight, can I ask you something? Shuffling of papers and the shuddering of a file cabinet. Sure, Pinky. What do you want to know? A short pause. What if this doesn't work? What if this is the wrong choice? Maybe I could just find another way to be helpful. I have plenty of ideas about other things. Like, maybe finding a way to make my Pinky sense... Hoof slam on the desk. No! Pinky, we've been over this. The project will work. I know you're still worried it will end up as chaotic as the previous experiment, but it has to work. For Copper. Dwight? Are you alright? Who's Copper? Once again, the audio log clicked and stopped. The first audio log was with something useful, but I can't, for some reason, find myself caring about it. Why in the 120-year-old depths of Copper Rivet, weighing so heavily on my mind? Maybe I just needed some time to think about it. What I probably really needed was one of those pre-war psychologists. I have a mountain of issues I need to get sorted out. First, as much as it was going to suck, I needed to get my legs sorted out. I can't hide in sats forever. I canceled the spell and braced myself for the hell that was to come. Backlash. Wake up. A familiar voice called out. I felt some pony slapping my cheek lightly as my senses returned, the wood floor under my back feeling cold as I shifted on it. I opened my eyes slowly to see Brass's frowning face staring down at me. No, wait. He was just upside down, and was smiling. One day, medicine is going to be really hard to come by in the wasteland, so I suggest you stop losing any more limbs. I rolled over onto my hooves, happy to be able to move my rear legs again, happy to feel all 4 of my hooves on the floor. I went to stand up, but jolts of pain ran through my flank as the muscles refused to lift me. I whimpered softly and dropped back down. I forgot about the muscle weakness. At least there wasn't an oversized safe waiting to crush me from the floor above. Oh yeah, Doc Lodge told me to give you this. Brass's horn glowed softly, levitating a small white tablet into my muzzle. I opened my muzzle and bit down on the chalky buck tab, feeling a surge of energy warming through my body. I felt good. I stretched out my limbs as I lay there, noting how each one felt like I could buck right through solid wood, even with regrown limbs. Last time Skyline gave me some of this, I ran our cart through the leg-deep mud of Radgator Forest in 10 minutes flat. You really need to stop passing out all the time. It's like you use it to conveniently pass the time. He spoke flatly. I really do. But I can't choose to do it any more than I can choose my cutie mark. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the cool air on my hairless rear legs. And thank you, Brass. I value your honesty. I looked up at him as he smiled. You have no idea how much it means to me. How much you mean to me. A blush flushed through his cracked skin as he nervously looked away. I reached my hoof up carefully, prodding him in the chest as softly as I could manage. Brass, I meant what I said. You're more than just a friend. You're family to me. Backlash. Even though he was a ghoul, it didn't stop him from blushing as bright as I'd ever seen him. I would totally hug the hell out of you if it weren't for the whole burning thing. He gestured to my still bloody chest, a smile wide on his muzzle. It's probably dry by now, but I think we need to take a shower, or 3, when we can. Oh, that does sound nice. I groaned and closed my eyes, trying to imagine the water running over my coat. My ear flickered and perked up, as I could hear some pony approaching. The door across the room opened as the doctor limped inside, his horn glowing. I'm so glad you're recovering. It would have been a real shame for you to die before I got a chance to know who I was saving. The doctor stated sarcastically with a smile, floating a fairly rusty-looking bolt-action rifle to his side. I've always been a sucker for my patients' stories. So tell me, why the hell did you appear in Red Wing? Red Wing? I asked. As in, the old mining town. I probably sounded like a moron. If that was true, then Brass and I were lucky we didn't teleport straight into Full Mountain. Brass stepped around me and stood firmly. We were taken by the Alicorn. It was injured and miscast a teleportation spell. We were lucky we didn't wind up inside the mountain. Damn it, Brass. You're on fire today with your mind-readingness. Taken? So you two don't work for the Pinkos? He asked, swinging the barrel of the old weapon between us slowly. You think we work for the who? You mean the Pink Mare's gang? I grumbled and held up my pitbuck to him. We're the ponies that they're looking for. I put my hoof down, straining to pull myself up, my rear legs refusing to bear the weight again, even with the buck running through my system. So I scooted them apart so I could at least sit upright. Well, if that's true, then maybe you could kindly pay your bill and get the hell out of town before you get every pony here killed. They run through here every morning looking for you. He moved the gun away, propping it up against the doorframe as he spoke. The way he talked about us paying threw his voice off. He wasn't being honest with us. Well, Dr. Lodge, I'm sure you've already noticed, we don't have anything to pay you with. Brass turned and joined me by my side. No guns, no barding, no supplies, no caps. Has any pony told you recently how amazingly observant you are? He squinted his eyes and sighed. But you do have that. He pointed to my pip buck. The mayor's been searching for some pony with a working pip buck. I don't know what exactly for, but it has to be something to do with what they found in the mine. He turned around and limped out of the door. Follow me. Best not to keep him waiting. Quick question, I called out to him, listening as he stopped in the hallway. How am I supposed to get there? Doc Lodge let out a loud sigh, levitating a pair of full leg braces around the doorway. I looked to Brass and gave him a weak smile. He nodded and used his magic to fasten the straps to me, wrapping the leather tightly around my bare skin as the metal frames creaked. Okay. I'll need to lock them in place once you stand up. It's going to hurt, but you need to stand long enough for me to do it. Brass told me as his eyes fed me with sympathy. I took a couple of deep breaths, trying to psych myself up for it. I can do this. It's only a few seconds. I leaned forward, dragging myself up with my might. My flank exploded in pain as I put as much weight on my front legs as I could. Brass's horn flashed as my ears heard the clicks from the braces. I groaned and evened out my stance, the pain in my rear leg still pulsing, but not unbearable. I tried to stride forward, nearly losing my balance as my rear hoof didn't have the freedom it normally did. Okay, this was going to make walking really awkward. You got a backlash? Brass asked as he trotted forward into the doorway. Yeah, just have to take it one hoof at a time. I smiled as best I could, and did just that. I put one hoof in front of the other, and slowly shambled my way out of the room. The hallway leading to the front door was short. The only distinguishing feature was a single black and white picture hanging on the wall. I glanced at it as I made my way to the open door. It was a photograph of a whole group of smiling Pegasi in their enclave uniforms. Shrugging it off, I made my way out to the porch, stopping as I reached the edge. We meet again, my old nemesis, I muttered as I glared at the single stair in front of me that led to the dirt road. I went to take another step, finding myself enveloped in magic. I looked up to see a layer of overglow enveloping Brass's horn, his magic pulling me off the porch and slowly placing me down on the dry dirt street. The glow from his horn dissipated as he panted heavily, looking up to me with as much of a smile as he could form. We continued along the vacant streets of the old mining town, the darkening skies making it hard for me to see where we were being taken. Red Wing was not a town I liked to be stopped in. The ponies here were mostly miners trying to scour what little they could of what the old world missed in the mine. But when you spend your life trying to hoard as much as you can, you become mistrusting of others. We turned around one of the buildings we passed, following as the road doubled back and followed the slope of the mountain. The inn skyline I normally stayed in was all the way at the bottom of the town, and I'd never really been through here, though. I looked over at Brass. His eyelids hung low, and his steps were sluggish. Brass, do you want to ride me? I asked without thinking, the gears in my head grinding to a halt as I realized how that sounded. But contrary to what I was expecting, Brass just kept walking along. Wow, levitating me must have really taken it out of him. Brass! I raised my voice, watching as he jolted his attention just before tripping on a rock, dropping forward onto his muzzle. I stopped walking as he flopped onto the ground and groaned, rubbing his muzzle between his hooves. Brass, get on my back and rest. No, the extra weight, he started to say as he pushed himself back to his hooves. I'm not going to take no for an answer. I cut him off, pushing my head underneath him and hoisting him onto my head. I grunted and did my best to nudge him along my neck. I felt him sigh and slide down and hold me tightly. Now, was that so hard? I craned my neck to look back at him, met only with the sound of him yawning. At least the blood in me was dry. I smiled to myself and continued following the doctor of the incredibly tiring dirt incline. The only reason I had been keeping up with him was because even with as awkward of a gait as I used to have in these braces, his limp made him nearly as slow. After a few more minutes, my legs were begging me to stop and rest. But we had just turned another corner, and I still didn't know how far we had to go. I let my mind wander, thinking back to the Gallant. Brass was right. Longbow couldn't have been working this whole time as a double agent. I would have read it on her face the second she tried to lie. Right? Nobody has been good enough to lie to my face, and I don't think that Longbow would be that convincing. The emotions she had when we talked, they were the same as every other pony who wore them without deception. How could I even consider her at all? I looked up the road as the last bit of natural daylight faded, glancing over at a rickety-looking cabin at the end of the road. A single yellowing porch light brightened the front of the structure. Dim lights barely made it through the clothes that were hung in the windows. As we trudged closer and closer, the gears in my head put out a disturbing realization. For the first time in my life, I was on my own.